Lucky Suit is the 16th episode of season 6 of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is directed by Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And it's a really delightful, very funny, and slightly emotional at one point episode. It starts off with Robert revealing that he has an interview with the FBI for a new job. He's very excited about this. And then he gets ready in the morning, he gets on his lucky suit, and everything seems fine. Marie seems insistent that he's putting on a jacket over the top, and then we find out why. He turns around, and Frank notices that on the back of Robert's suit jacket is a giant iron stain. It turns out Marie was watching television while ironing, and there was something on about how Raymond was going to be on TV, and obviously she got distracted. And that explanation makes sense, because Marie prides herself on being a good housekeeper, on being very tidy and orderly, and making an error like this seemed like something that she wouldn't do. But when they explained it was because of Raymond, it made a little bit more sense. Needless to say, Robert's not happy. He puts on a different suit, and he goes to the interview, and he meets Special Agent Thomas Garfield, played by Sam Anderson. They're looking over his permanent record. It's going really well for maybe a minute, and then there's a fax. And Special Agent Garfield starts reading the fax, and Robert's face is incredible. His facial expression is so fabulous. He's stunned into silence because the fax is from Marie. And it's quite a long fax, and it just seems to keep going and going and going, and it'll cut back and forth between the agent and Robert's facial expression, and it's so brilliantly executed. And then there's silence, as it seems like the fax is finished. I thought this was so perfectly executed. It is silent, and then Robert kind of clears his throat, and without missing a beat, the special agent jumps in with P.S., and then there's some more. And just the delivery of that, I thought was just so perfect, so perfectly timed. Needless to say, Robert's not happy, and I genuinely was very scared, because he turns up after the interview in the doorway of Ray and Debra's. Marie is there at that point, and obviously Robert is basically the height of the door, and obviously he kind of fills the door, and the way he's standing is scary, and then his eyes are absolutely terrifying. Really, really scary. Brad Garrett's performance was absolutely incredible, and he gets angrier and angrier. Debra has to stand in front of Marie to stop Robert from, I was going to say going after her. It never really felt like he was going to hit her or anything, but it's very clear that thought is in his mind. And when he shouted, "Listen to me, woman," it's very clear that, at least to me, he was potentially about to lose control. I think in that moment he was doing his best to not completely lose it. Struggling, but succeeding. But I feel like when he shouted that, it was very close to falling apart and everything unraveling. And it was genuinely, genuinely terrifying. And it's brilliantly executed. And he starts referring to Marie as the queen, and the others are all being insulted as well. And then he says to her, "Just stay out of my life." And yes, that's coming from a place of anger. And I feel like that's the last thing Marie would want one of her sons to say to her. And it hurt. And I'm not saying Marie did the right thing, but it for me as a viewer, it hurt to hear Robert saying that, even though I think he's justified in his anger. And it was a very emotional scene. I felt a lot of emotions in that scene, and it was just so brilliantly executed. And Marie says, "Fine, if that's what you want, I will." And then the comedy is brought right back up, because just after she said that, a split second later, we cut to Marie in Special Agent Garfield's office, which it's so funny. And she's talking with him, she's brought him cookies, and he was able to get to the bottom of it. And he made her admit that while she's seemingly trying to do all of these things for Robert to get the job, it's actually because she doesn't want him to get the job, and she's kind of sabotaging it because, as she finally admits, he was supposed to retire within a year, and finally she'd stop worrying about him. And it all made perfect sense. And I think it was a really good thing to include for a few reasons. One, it shows how Marie was really feeling, but it also shows that all of those things she was doing, she wasn't just doing it to butt into Robert's life. It was a response to how she was really feeling. It doesn't excuse it, but I think that's a better explanation. She was doing it out of love and panic and fear rather than just a need to interfere with Robert's life. And I think it was the right direction to take it. And it obviously got quite emotional in that scene, and it was a really, really beautiful moment. And then Marie goes to see Robert, and she lied about where she'd been, but apparently Special Agent Garfield had phoned Robert. And the funniest part is, as they were leaving Robert's apartment, they made up, everything was fine. And she confessed that she did actually stop for pie, which was the lie she told. She said that's when she realised what she'd done. But when she told the lie, she said a different pie, even though she did stop for pie afterwards. And she just made up a different pie, which I think maybe in her frustration of how she'd behaved, combined with the fact that she's desperate for Robert to forgive her, I think just in a bit of a fluster, she just said the wrong pie. But it just made me laugh so much. And then we have the final scene, which is brilliant. Everybody's gathered at the house. It's time for Raymond to appear on television, which is very exciting. And Geoffrey heard about Robert's lucky suit, so he made him a lucky hat. And Robert puts on this crown, and then Marie tells him to be quiet because Raymond's about to be on television. And Robert's face in that moment was brilliant. Brad Garrett's face in this episode is just absolutely fabulous, so incredible. And yeah, his face, I can see it in my head. Brilliant. And then we find out that the TV show's not going to be on, and suddenly Robert's happy. Maybe it's a lucky hat after all, because things haven't worked out for Raymond, and for Robert, that is a good thing. So I thought it was quite a nice way to end things, and just to pick Robert up a little bit. And I forgot to mention as well that when Marie went to visit Special Agent Garfield, he told her, and I'm sure he told Robert this on the phone as well, that he wasn't not getting the job because of Marie. It was simply because there were other candidates more qualified, which I think was also a really important thing to establish. Because if we were led to continue believing that he didn't get the job because of Marie, I think that would be quite unpleasant. So I think they took all of the right directions with this. It's a very funny episode. Brad Garrett, everybody gave a great performance, but Brad Garrett in particular was just absolutely incredible. Needless to say, Lucky Suit is a wonderful episode of Everybody Loves Raymond.